Good morning, everybody. It was quite the trek finding my way here, but got here. Good morning. Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Board Member Palacios.
Here.
Dettel.
Here.
Montoya.
Here.
Goldstein is currently absent. Bauman.
Here.
Harvey is absent. Agater. Espinoza.
Here.
Vice Chair Corpus.
Here.
And Chair Mendez.
Here. Thank you. Moving along, is there any consideration for late additions to deletions to the consent and or regular agenda from staff or the board?
Chair, I just have one that was sent out to the board. Agenda item number 10, change the subject title from approve to concur with policy board's direction on the formation and structure of the Community Advisory Council.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? All right, moving along. Public comment. The public may provide comment on any item not on the agenda, but the board may not take action on this at this meeting on any item not listed on the agenda, other than to refer the matter to staff or set it for a future meeting. Is there any member of the public that wishes to address the board? Okay, hearing none. We're kind of getting a little bit more fine-tuned with our agenda. So is there any item on the agenda that any board member would feel a need to disqualify themselves from considering? Okay, great. Moving on, consent agenda. Pull 6. Anything else from the board and or staff on the consent agenda? Any member of the public have any item or anything they'd like to discuss on the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'd like to bring it back to the board. Motion on the consent agenda number 5, 7, and 8. Been moved, Mr. Montoya, second, Mr. Bauman. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. Item number 6.
Yeah, I'm the alternate for the City of Santa Cruz, City Manager Martin Bernal. Has difficulty meeting this time,
Okay.
and he was wondering if we could have a discussion about either. I know it's proposed to extend the time to 10:30, but there may be some other opportunities that we could talk about. Even having, we had some discussion, possibly a on-site facility or something like that could be teleconference or whatever. Something to consider.
Okay.
So the proposal would be that they would convene in Santa Cruz County and here, and we would use our teleconferencing ability in both facilities to conduct the meeting, and it would be Brown Act notice in both locations, and it would provide accessibility to Santa Cruz residents as well as Monterey County residents. And then the meeting could be conducted on a regular basis if staff thinks that's feasible.
Any staff, Mr. Washi?
I don't hear any objection. I'm deferring to Angela, and she says that that would work fine.
Okay, great.
So again, just to clarify, would we be moving it to 10:30?
So I don't think that was,
Well, that would, I mean, the 10:30 would be helpful also, so I would agree with that.
Yeah,
but
that's important for us. I'm the alternate for Marina, and our city manager has 4 board meetings at the same time, so that's the challenge we're faced with. So
One more option, Mr. Chairman, if you wish to move the meeting date to the second Wednesday, it seems that the first and the third Wednesday is a concern for some. So if you wish to move the meeting to the second Wednesday of the month, that would be fine as well. You can just make that change as an amendment to the motion, and then we can go from there.
Mr. Chair, another
Yep.
question for you. So where at in Santa Cruz County would we be teleconferencing then?
Well, there's different options. We could do it at the city council chambers in Santa Cruz, also the board chambers on Santa Cruz County. You could have multiple sites, so you could also do one from the Watsonville city council chambers. All we'd have to do is just notice it, and then we just have to make sure that the public that it's open to the public and noticed on site as well. So there's Brown Act provisions, but I would say we just work with staff, and for us in Santa Cruz, that would be useful to have and we could work it out between the city and the county and Capitola and Scotts Valley to see where, what site would be the most convenient for us.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a problem with having a location in Santa Cruz County. I think we should probably have two, but if we have more than that, I think it's going to get a little out of hand. The other thing is that I would prefer, just me, it's easier for me to take a 30-minute drive here because it would take me about an hour plus to get to Santa Cruz. So we just need to figure out that location because the traffic is just insane.
You could choose either, yeah. The other thing,
Mr. Chairman, just for simplicity's sake, and I'm just deferring to Brain because I know that trying to put this meeting together is not an easy task. To the extent that you want to have a second site, that would be fine. We obviously prefer to whole meet in the same place, but if you want to have a second site, we can deal with that. Multiple sites, then it becomes a little bit more difficult, and it just makes it tough to try to make sure that the electronics are all working in all the different places and whatnot. And of course, for Charles and anybody else who feels that the drive to here is the better way to go, then of course you can come over here. And for others who feel that the drive from Santa Cruz is fairly lengthy, and if there's one or two people that want to stay in Santa Cruz, that would be fine as well for us. But if you can keep it to just the two places, that would be great for us. Thanks.
Corvus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think changing the date would probably be logistically better for everyone, and particularly staff, knowing that when we try to set up two places for the public to respond to, it's very difficult, and the notification, etc. And we don't have, I think, but Bren, right? So we don't have a cast of thousands. So I would just, see if there's a survey or polling of the board members to see if the second or the first week works better in terms of the Wednesdays that you mentioned, Tom.
I think we can take the poll right here and right now. To the extent that you want to have the second Wednesday of the month to be your meeting time, then just amend the motion that or amend the recommendation that we're making, and we can go straight for the second meeting. For the operations board, we will keep the policy board on the first Wednesday for the meeting that's already been scheduled.
So I guess the question to the board is, with moving the meeting to the second Wednesday, negate the reasoning to have two meeting sites on Wednesday? Or are we still, those are two separate issues?
I think they're separate issues. Yeah. And I think the public in Santa Cruz also, in wanting to participate, would appreciate having a site where they could attend, because having people spend an hour and a half to come here for a meeting from Santa Cruz is going to be difficult. So I think if we had a Santa Cruz site and this site, that would be one issue, and then the other time issue is the meeting time.
So I'm assuming, Bren, we would have to notify you to let you know what site we're going to be at?
That's correct, and whether or not there's going to be Skype capabilities or other, technical issues that you guys desire. There's a lot of issues that need to be considered.
Right. It seems like maybe we could, if it's the second Wednesday, that might help, but maybe we could work towards finding a site and add that as it goes. It maybe gives staff some time to work through the details.
If I may make a recommendation, Mr. Chair, real quick, is that if everybody on the board's fine with moving the meeting, if you or the vice chair can then work with staff to figure out the logistics, that way we don't have to figure it out here right now.
So to that end, let me make a motion that we adopt attachment 1, which sets the meeting time at 10:30 a.m. And we'll keep the regular meeting schedule until we do a poll. And we can change the resolution at our next meeting if the poll confirms that the second Wednesday is a preferred date. And in the intervening period, we would request that staff test, if you will, the teleconferencing ability and bring back a report in regard to feasibility of utilizing that technique for 2 sites only, Santa Cruz and here in Garden Court.
Clarification.
Go ahead.
Would you still move it to 10:30? Is that still the recommendation?
The resolution currently has 10:30 on it.
I just had one other comment before we vote. I think that in board meetings when there is particular interest, public interest in an item, I'm looking at our executive director, that you would consider scheduling the meeting at an alternate site that has better capacity. Obviously, this is there's not much seating room in here, and if we have a big crowd, I think that's not going to be well thought of. And I also worry about the accessibility of this site. It's fairly hidden for somebody coming on their first time. And so I think when there's a particular item that has a lot of public interest, that we ought to think about scheduling it at Salinas City Hall or the board chambers in Monterey or Watsonville City Council. Because this site, I think for a regular meeting might be okay, but I think obviously there's not going to be enough seating for a big crowd, and this is not a very accessible site. And so I would like to make sure that in the future, when we look at the agenda, the chair would have to work with the CEO to know that there's going to be an item that we think about alternate site selection for that meeting, just for that particular meeting.
Okay. Great. There's a motion on the table.
Second.
Move in second. Any further discussion?
We need the public to comment if they have anything.
And I'm sorry, was that Board Member Dettel? Did you second?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any member of the public wishing to address the board on this topic?
Hi, Kevin Dayton here, resident of Monterey. I'm wondering, would you be able to provide public to an opportunity to use Wi-Fi in the future? It doesn't look like there's Wi-Fi here available for the public. And one thing I do with my laptop, and maybe others in the public do it too, as things are brought up or referred to, oh, it looks like we do have a Wi-Fi option here. Thank you for this, and if you could make sure that the public is aware that there's Wi-Fi access, then we can use it. Thank you.
Anything further from the public? Great, thank you. Bringing it back to the board, there's a motion and a second on the table for discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Moving on to the regular agenda, item number 9, CEO's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few things to report on today. First, introduction of the new employees that have joined us in the last probably 2 months. Mary Hernandez, she started with us in January 22nd. She's administrative assistant. She's the first face that you see when you come into the door, and she's providing quite a valuable support for Bren. Jeremy Clark just joined us almost a month ago, and he's our energy trading manager. He's right behind you, right over there. The first of I would say 3 or 4 power resource staff that we're going to bring in over the next month or so. Jeremy's got at least 15 years of experience working in this field, and he's already hit the ground running. Peter Pearson, he just came in on Monday, so this is his 3rd day on the job. He's going to be our compliance manager also in the power resources area, and he's coming to us with roughly about maybe close to maybe 20 years of experience working in Southern California in this field. And finally, Stephen Tui, and he is the financial analyst, and he also joined in a couple of days ago. We're going to be bringing in a few more people coming in the next couple of weeks. So in the next month when we get together, probably I'll be introducing 4 more people.
Welcome, everyone.
The marketing report is attached to the CEO report. If you have any questions on it, I got Peter over here somewhere, I think. I can't see him, but we can bring him in. That's the best thing about this, having the meeting over here. He will be definitely answer any questions that you have. And one of the things that we want to report on when it comes to the marketing is the opt-outs report. And now that we have brought in all the commercial, industrial, agricultural customer, all the customers, all the accounts other than the residential customers, we are now can report as of 2 days ago that we have somewhere around 76 customers that opted out, that make up a little over 2.3% of that sector's total demand. It is, and that number will be about 1.75 of the total demand of this area, including the residential sector. This is a pretty decent number as far as opt-out is concerned. But we are working, and later on we're going to talk today about actions that we can take in order to bring some of these customers back, and also to avoid having any other customers go for opting out. On the regulatory update, the biggest issue that we are dealing with now is the PCIA, the Power Charge Indifference Adjustment. That is an open proceeding now going at the CPUC. We have submitted our comments and testimony. There will be others, being specifically PG&E and the other investor-owned utility, also are submitting their testimony. There will be judgment probably on this issue sometime around July of this year, with expectations that the Commission will vote on this issue sometime in August or September. Just to summarize it, the PG&E more specifically is telling us that they're really under collecting the PCIA by about 45%. And of course, if they have their way, then the PCIA will go up by about maybe 1.1 cent per kilowatt hour. Just to illustrate, 1 cent per kilowatt hour increase will translate into $35 million taken out of our bottom line. We are, in our testimony, which is fairly large and comprehensive, are saying there are many ways that the PCIA could be dealt with, and that we actually can find ways, and did the numbers and found that really they are over collecting, not under collecting. So all that is going to be going to administrative law judge, and he then will rule on the issue sometime in July. We are hopeful, of course, that we actually save some money on the PCIA, or find ways to upfront pay it and be able to pay that loan if we get one over a number of years that will stretch beyond what the PCIA will be collected during. Last is that I want to report on is the amendment for the fiscal year 2017-2018 budget. We've submitted that to the policy board last month. It looks like we're gonna get some more money because the change in the PG&E's rates. The rates went up by roughly about 8% on the average. That will increase. Obviously, we raised our rates accordingly. That will increase our revenue by about $16 million. But power supply cost, whether it's resource adequacy or other products that we are buying, pushed our price or our cost up by about $8 million. So we're netting an additional $8 million to what we've shared with you in the past. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that's my report. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board to staff? Mr. Baumann?
Is there the opt-out list in this packet here? The list of customers that opted out?
No, it is not, and we cannot share it actually because this customer information is supposed to stay confidential. We certainly, and we've signed NDAs to that effect that we can just share this information in public. Obviously, we want to prevent any pressure, undue pressure being put on some of these customers. Not to mention, we are working with them. We are working very hard with them, and we're working with elected officials that can work with them in order to try to bring them back.
Any other question from the board? Theo?
Can you talk about categories of individuals or the categories of the types that have opted out? Is there a specific, type of customer that were not appeared to be attractive to?
Mark, without revealing names, please.
Sure.
In terms of the customers who have opted out, it really isn't by a category. It's not an industry vertical or anything like that. It primarily has to do with customers who have energy as a very large budget item or a very large percentage of their budget item. So as we go through some of the steps that we're taking to work with these customers and bring them back in, only 7 customers represent about 80% of the total opt-out load. So you have a few large customers who have internal requirements. Their energy manager wants a little bit more from us in terms of working with them to really make them feel comfortable to be enrolled. So it's not so much a category as it is just customers that have additional requirements and just have a different approach to managing this large item on their budget.
Great, thank you. Any other questions on the board? Mr. Corpus?
So on the regulatory update, do you have a time frame for the next step in terms of knowing
Yeah.
what that, how that might be resolved in any financial analysis that might accompany that?
Of course, we'll get us the first sign. We'll have around July timeframe when a decision is issued by the judge. From there will be obviously more appeal to the full commission. Then the commission will rule on it sometime in August or September. So the first signs will come in July. We'll be able to report then to you how things are going. You're not meeting in July or August, but I can assure you that as soon as we get information, I'll just put it in an email and send it to everybody.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, any member of the public wish to comment on this item? Hearing none? Great, thank you. Moving on, this is just presentation discussion only. Moving on to the next item. Item number 10, that's the one that was amended.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm inviting Beth. She's going to be sharing this with you today.
Good morning.
In March, at the policy board settled on the Community Advisory Council's formation, the member selection process, as well as the approach for defining and approving the scope. Staff is recommending that the operations board concur with the policy board's direction. So if accepted, that would mean that the Community Advisory Council would advise both the operations board as well as the policy board on matters that fall within each board's purview. So let me share a little more detail. Do I hit this one? Thank you. Oop, that one, okay. First, regarding the CAC formation, there will be 11 members representing customers and stakeholders in the Tri-County area. They'll meet once a month. The first year of appointment terms will vary, 1, 2, or 3 years. All following appointments will be for 3 years. The Community Advisory Council chairperson or designee would be a liaison between the board and council and would report out at the board meetings and carry back direction to the council. Regarding the scope, it was decided that the seated CAC members would draft their scope of responsibility and bylaws, and then as proposed, each board would approve the elements of the advisory council scope and bylaws that directly relate to the powers and functions of each board, as listed in the JPA. Regarding the application and selection process, staff was the policy board directed staff to make the CAC application available to the customers, which we did on March 16th. It was posted on the Monterey Bay Community Power website. Broad outreach began the following week. You'll find the application on various websites, including MBARD and AMBAG, as well as some of our city partner websites. All public information officers have received the information, and you'll see a lot through social media and newsletters through all of these different agencies. The application due date is April 30th. Once we've received all of the applications in May, I'll compile a list of all of the applicants organized by geography, skills, and association, and then that list, along with the applications, will be provided to a policy subcommittee. Also in March, the 3 county supervisors were named to that subcommittee. So that subcommittee will select the CAC candidates, and then the full policy board will appoint the members. Oh, I did. So again, just a quick summary. We are recommending that the operations board concur with the policy board's direction regarding the advisory council's formation, the selection process, member selection process, as well as the approach to defining and approving the scope.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question on the formation of the JPA and the broad powers that this organization has as the operations and the policy boards. Is there a nexus there in the JPA formation that allows us to create all kinds of different committees, or is there a requirement that that JPA go back, be amended by the current members?
I think the JPA states clearly that either boards can form committees and subcommittees as they see fit. This committee, on the other hand, just to be clear, is really being formed to support both boards. And since it was approved already by the policy board, we thought it's the right thing to come to you and make sure that you are concurring with the formation of this committee, because it will be supporting you as well.
Okay. Mr. Baumann?
Yes, can you clarify, are there qualifications or criteria to be eligible as a community representative?
The only qualifications are to either live or work in one of the 3 counties. So you have to be a tri-county resident or employee.
So just a question, I mean, it's common to have, criteria that there's a specific interest or so many years of experience or represent a particular industry group. Is it the operations board recommendation that it just simply be a resident?
Our intent, by the way, is to list all the names of the applicants, then show what they bring to the table, so to speak, whether it's experience or any other qualifications, and just make that clear to when we get all the applications. We'll have just all the names and their experiences on one sheet of paper and submit that to the selection committee, who in turn will be nominating the state that they want to the full policy board. So they're not the ones to select, but they actually just to nominate the slate. Then the policy board will have another chance to go over the names, the applications, the qualifications, and make a change as they see fit.
Mr. Corpus?
Just to further question that, are there conditions whereby if you're a current contractor, you live inside this Tri-County, and you have a contract with Monterey Bay Community Power, you're qualified to serve if you're selected? I think that's what Mr. Bauman is trying to get at, is that where we have good citizen representation, where there may not be either a very special interest or conflict.
Yeah, our intent, we did not, because we haven't got too many applications so far, we did not put any limitations or restrictions. We are also advised by our attorney that since this is an advisory group, not a decision-making group, there are certain leeways that could be given in regard to who gets to apply and who gets to be on that board. We will point out, however, if there's a potential conflict that may arise, an obvious one, we will point that out to the selection committee and eventually to the full board.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? Any member of the public wishes to address the board on this item? Great, seeing none, I'd like to bring it back to the board.
So, Lou, are you interested in suggesting a preference of some kind? Or is, it would be just advisory, I guess, to the formation? That those kinds of considerations be, at least looked at by the selection committee of the policy board?
I think it's a good question, but perhaps if they're having trouble recruiting folks, I think if all the qualifications are clearly identified to both the selection committee and the full board,
Right.
they consider. I would further recommend that we ensure that members of this board and the policy board, as well as the advisory board, take the AB, I think it's 1234 training that clearly specifies conflict of interest, so that if folks are, like Mr. Corpus pointed out, if they are contractors, they are clearly aware when it's appropriate to recuse themselves from a decision that could potentially benefit them.
I agree. I think probably the first two meetings will be all about Brown Act and conflict of interest and a variety of other things that has nothing to do with the day-to-day work that we do.
Right. So, I think you need a motion to concur.
So moved.
Okay,
Just if there's any public comments.
okay, I thought I already did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is there any member of the public wishes to address? Okay, seeing none, bringing it back, it was, I think, motion by Mr. Palacio, second by Mr. Bauman. All in favor? Opposed? None, okay, thank you. Moving on to the next item, approve MBC power product offering.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to make an introduction for the next four items. Then Mark will take them one at a time, and we're going to stop to allow for discussion and voting and taking the action by the board. Then we'll move on to the next item.
Okay, great.
In general, now that we've done with our phase number one, and we found that we got a few customers that opted out, and others are basically saying you need to make a change, otherwise we will opt out, but they are staying in. We found that generally there are 5 different categories of opt-out folks. The first ones tend to be we've been working with PG&E forever. We don't care to make any change. Thank you very much. We don't care for rebate or any of that stuff that you are offering. We're going to continue on our current path. And for those folks who say best of luck, that's fine. We'll be there in case you change your mind. There's a second category of people that basically say they want some assurance. They want competitive assurance that the rates will never go above PG&E. And so for those folks, we're going to offer an agreement, and Mark will talk about it in a minute. There's a third class of people that would like an assurance of how to budget. So even though they don't care where PG&E's rates will be going, but they would like a couple of years worth of stable rates. And for those folks also, we got an approach that we want to take with them. A fourth class of customers is coming to us saying, well, I don't really care for the power resource mix that you got. I would like an option that would allow me to buy 100% or to have my resource be met with 100% renewable resource. And for those folks also, we just got a new product to add to the MB Choice, MB Green Plus, and MB Share. And finally, there's a group of folks that prefer to wait and see that the 3% rebate that they're might get this year and might increase next year is not good enough for them to want to have that switch happen. And for those folks, we have a policy that we put together that we're going to share with you today. And with that, I'll stop. I'll ask Mark to take those items one at a time and allow for time for you folks to discuss and vote on it. Mark.
And just to add on to that a little bit, the way I view this sort of set of agreements and policies is just as tools for the strategic accounts team to be able to deliver on part of the promise of community choice, which is being able to be more adaptable and more responsive to different customer needs. So the first agreement that we're proposing is a price protection agreement, where a number of customers are really just asking for additional assurance that their costs won't go higher than PG&E's under our service. This is something that we can offer with a very high degree of confidence. And it's something that customers that have, as I mentioned before, a particular approach to risk management and just an additional sensitivity because of the size of the energy budget that they're managing, value this enough that we are proposing to be able to guarantee these customers that their overall price won't go higher than PG&E's under our service, and that for that additional service, they would forego half of their rebate, 50%. So there's a minimal cost to them in terms of just giving up some of the benefit, but they gain an additional protection, an additional agreement from us that we will make sure that their costs don't exceed what they would have paid to the incumbent electric utility, PG&E. And just in terms of some of the details, there's one change that I would make to the staff report. This would be for a fixed term of 1 to 5 years, and then it would be an automatic renewal of 1 year without an additional amendment. The staff report has some outdated language that it would be a series of year renewals, but it would be for a fixed term of somewhere between 1 to 5 years at the customer's request, and then it would have a 1 year of automatic renewal.
Thank you. Any questions of staff?
So that, on the face of it, it seems like a reasonable approach. Has there been any analysis of the actual risk, given that we will have long-term contracts and we make a covenant to retail at a maximum rate? So is this just an assumption, or was there an actual analysis of the contracts and the potential for exceeding wholesale rates, exceeding retail rates?
Lengthy analysis, the answer is no. It is intuitively, at least on my part, to make the conclusion that over the next 5 years, we are looking at a gross margin of about 25%. The likelihood of us ever having our rates go above PG&E is really very small. And to the extent that we can give that guarantee and in return get half of the rebate that customer will be entitled to, I think it's a win for everyone. But if you're asking for the analysis, the answer is no, we don't have it.
So is it a complicated analysis, or is it worth doing a little bit of math just to give us a comfort level?
I mean, I can tell you that it will be definitely a gain on our part. I would give the chances for our rates to go above PG&E over the next 5 years, which is the period of time that this contract will be limited to, when we can cancel it after that, is definitely, based on the numbers that I've seen, is considerably less than 1%. And if it does go above, if we have to push it above at that 1%, you can just say what's the above delta and multiply that by 1%, and it would be considerably smaller than what the customer is going to will be paying, which is half of their rebate. But it does give them what they need, which is the assurance that they want, and it gives us some additional income that we can use for increasing the programs that we offer, increasing rebates for customers.
Any other questions on the board?
I have a question
Palacios.
regarding legislative changes. So what would happen if the legislature were to do something that would change the marketplace that resulted in our rates being higher than PG&E? Do you have any worries about that, or is there anything in the contract that allows to give us an out if it's something beyond our control, such as legislative changes in the legislature?
We don't have that, and I'm sorry. Oh, yeah.
As part of the agreement, there is a stipulation that if there is a change in law, the parties will meet and try to come to an agreement that will work for both parties. So we do take those sort of regulatory or legal changes into account in this.
And then if an agreement can't be reached, then we can cancel it.
Okay.
So it's specifically in there.
Yeah, it seems to me that's probably our biggest risk here, so thank you for that.
And just from an operational standpoint, I think this is really just an opportunity for us to walk the walk in a really straightforward way. I've had a number of strategic accounts, explicitly say, well, you can't guarantee your prices won't stay below PG&E's, and we have a high confidence that we'll be able to beat that over the next 5 years. So I think this is a really simple win for us to be able to just put it on paper and create a very straightforward agreement for those customers.
And just to add one more point, that if there are changes in the law, or any changes or a ruling by the CPUC that will push this PCIA to a number that will push our rates way above PG&E, then we have a lot more to be concerned about than a single contract.
Any other questions, Mr. Corpus?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. 42% of the load lost is due to opt-outs, and this would bring back how many customers?
So doing just a really rough kind of estimate based on discussions that I've had with some of the key accounts that have opted out, about 7 customers make up about 80% of the total opt-out load. So these are the strategic accounts that have various concerns or just different processes that we're addressing with these proposals. And I think this proposal in particular, I did another sort of back of the envelope calculation. This would directly ameliorate about 5 of those customers' concerns. So my very rough estimate is that this would potentially bring back about half of the 80% of the opt-out load represented by the strategic accounts. So it's very meaningful.
So just a follow-up question. If we don't achieve those results, do we have to go back and amend the budget?
The budget now assumes 5% opt-out, and we're going to wait until we are fully phased in before we amend or revise the budget. We're certainly going to revise it. Comes September when the fiscal year ends and we start the new year. But I don't think any of what we're doing here for these specific customers is going to make that big of a difference.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, any member of the public wishes to address the board on this item? Great, seeing none, what's the pleasure of the board? It's been moved by Mr. Corpus. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Palacio. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Moving on to item number 12.
So for item number 12, based on a few strategic account conversations and then a significant amount of community input of customers who had a preference for 100% eligible renewable as opposed to eligible renewable and large hydro. We've put together a new service offering. So the current service offerings give customers the options for where they can apply their rebate, either taking it as a credit or applying it to MB Green Plus or MB Choice. This would be a service offering that would allow customers to voluntarily choose to eliminate the large hydro portion of their mix and receive 100% eligible renewable options, eligible renewable generation resources in their electricity mix. This is similar to what other CCAs offer in terms of 100% eligible renewable offerings. PG&E also has a 100% eligible renewable offering. So in addition to just meeting some of the strategic account and community demand, I think this also brings us in line with what both PG&E and other CCAs do, which is to be able to provide customers this for those who have a preference for solar and wind over large hydro. And based on just some early calculations from Tom, we're able to do this at what is roughly about an additional penny per kilowatt hour in charge. And that is just our cost for removing the large hydro portion for those customers' demand. So we think this is just a very straightforward step we can take to meet a lot of the community demand we've seen and some of the strategic account demand we've seen, and give customers more of a choice.
Great, thank you. Any comments from the board? Great, seeing none, any member of the public wishes to address the board on this item?
Hello to you all. My name's Amy Wolfram, and I'm here on behalf of the Monterey Bay Aquarium. I'm the California Ocean Policy Manager, and we very much appreciate Monterey Bay community's power, responsiveness to our interest in 100% all renewable option. We are one of those strategic accounts that expressed our desire to have an option that doesn't include large hydroelectric. This is in line with California's renewable portfolio standard, which is one of the reasons that we wanted this. And again, our thanks to the staff for their responsiveness to our interest, and we all hope that you'll vote in favor of this option. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Brennan Jensen on behalf of Monterey Bay Regional Climate Action Compact. And I also just wanted to express my appreciation for this new option. I know that this was something that was discussed quite a bit in the early days of formation, so we're really pleased to see this additional offer get incorporated. I support the comments made by Monterey Bay Aquarium, but I also wanted to add that I think there's a broad group of local community members and businesses that are interested in having these options as well. I'm also curious if staff could comment on what's the impact to the average bill of this sort of additional premium that's being offered, and if there's any strategy for promoting sort of an opting up, not just for non-residential, but as we move into the residential marketplace. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think in terms of the cost per customer, there will be a lot of, should I address the comments or wait until we?
I think.
Let's go ahead and wait.
I'll let the public.
Thank you.
Robert Frischmuth. I'm on the board of Communities for Sustainable Monterey County, and we also would like the operations board to approve this idea. Thank you.
Any other member of the public? So I think public comments, we'll just note them and then sort of bring it back as that it kind of evolves in the strategy and the policy where and if appropriate. Okay, thank you. Thank you, the public, for your great comments. I'd like to bring it back to the board. What's the pleasure of the board? Been moved by Mr. Montoya, second by Mr. Daigle. Any other discussion?
I would just request that staff, based on public comment, take into account what they can do to highlight and advertise this. And just a side note, I did get some comments that on the early flyers for the industrial, they were hard to read. So, we don't want to send too much paper, but just want to take that into account as well.
Great. There's a motion and a second on the table. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Great, thank you. Moving on to the next item, item 13.
So this is another of the agreements that the strategic accounts team, through various discussions with both strategic accounts directly and then also energy managers, third parties that work with them. This is an additional value add that we can provide them that PG&E could not. So what customers have requested when they're managing a large energy budget, they would like more ability to forecast what their costs will be moving forward. That's something that they can currently not do with PG&E. PG&E will change their generation rates multiple times a year, and currently Monterey Bay Community Power will follow those rates throughout the year. So they have variability, and that's what they've been working with for as long as they've been receiving power from PG&E. That's the current status quo. What we'd like to be able to do is we can, again, be more adaptable to what our customers request from us. And so we've put together a fixed rate agreement where a customer can fix their rates at a certain level for a period of 1 to 3 years. That will be pegged at 2% below what their costs would have been on the equivalent PG&E electricity rate. So it's going to differ customer to customer depending upon what tariff they're on. And then when PG&E raises their rates or drops their rates, they will receive a fixed generation charge from us. And again, that will be with no rebate, but instead of fixed reduction in cost of 2%. The one caveat on this is that PG&E is expected to do some significant changes to their tariff structures beginning in the first quarter of 2019. They're going to be changing what hours, the different time of use blocks, off-peak, partial peak, and peak, where those hours lie. And just to avoid a large amount of complexity, we're going to ask that these agreements, but we be provided the authority to draft and execute them after those changes have been made with PG&E.
Any comments or questions for staff? Any member of the public wishes to address the board on this item? Seeing none, I'd like to bring it back to the board. What's the pleasure of the board? Mr. Montoya?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Great. Hearing none. Moving on to item number 14.
So the last policy change that we're proposing is what we're calling a reserve fund fair contribution policy, where in our work with large customers, some customers adopt basically a wait and see approach, where they just want to see Monterey Bay Community Power operate effectively for a number of years, and then they'll make another decision on whether they want to opt in, which is a perfectly valid approach. What that does, though, because we're expecting our rebate percentage to increase in future years, the amount that we're rebating to customers, and because we'll be filling up our reserve fund in the first 2 years of operation, it creates a little bit of an unfair incentive for that wait and see approach, because a customer, rather than opting into our service during launch and then taking a 3% rebate or a 4% rebate and contributing to the reserve fund, they can simply wait and opt in at a later date and receive a rebate at a higher value. I also think what this policy change would do is say that for the amount of time that a customer has been eligible, non-residential customer has been eligible for service, and they choose to opt out and then opt in at a later date, then for an equal period of time, once they are receiving our service, that they receive a reduced rebate value of 50%, so that they would be contributing to the reserve fund, that they wouldn't be able to just enjoy the benefits of service without contributing to that fund in a fair way. And I think from a customer perspective, this just kind of completes a circle in terms of how customers understand us. I think when you don't have policies that promote adopting service from Monterey Bay Community Power, it leaves some customers a little confused and maybe makes them a little bit more hesitant to enroll until they fully understand Monterey Bay Community Power. So I've had a limited conversations with customers in terms of running this policy by them, and the response I've received is, oh, that makes sense, and that's fair. So I think it's a very straightforward way to make sure that there is no incentive to delay enrollment or to opt out. I think this kind of just completes the circle for customers in terms of understanding the rebate and understanding the value of enrolling as a Monterey Bay Community Power customer. And I think it puts just a clear underline and a quantifiable value in enrolling early and not waiting to see how service goes, but just going ahead and enrolling as a customer. So I think this will, probably not directly for a lot of these strategic customers make them immediately opt in. I think they're going to go through their normal decision-making process. But I think as that process continues and we continue to have conversations with them, I think this just creates a very clear, quantifiable value in just making the choice and enrolling with Monterey Bay Community Power.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for staff?
I have a question. Did you consider just, instead of cutting the rebate to 50%, just doing a first-year rebate of 3%, like what you're offering now? It seems it might be less explaining if you just say if you're in the first year, you get a 3% rebate, and then you go to the standard rebate as everybody else. I mean, has that been discussed?
Actually, we did look at it, and it just have a bit of a fatal flaw into it. If it happens that, let's say, they don't come in now, and on the third year they come in, but it just happened that in the third year things happen in a way that will force us to reduce our rebate to 1%. If we give them 3%, now we actually, rewarding them for staying out, and obviously we didn't want to go that way.
Mr. Baumann?
So I understand the carrot and stick, thinking behind this. The only concern I would have is that we're making the rates a little convoluted, and I think there's some value to certainty. And then the second question is that if we want to invest in infrastructure in lieu of giving rebates, that if we have a stable rebate rate and then we make the decision at such time, if we have adequate reserves, that we might want to invest in, say, facilitating service to communities such as Gonzales to help reasonable and appropriate development. So I'm not against this. I'm just a little bit concerned that we're trying to game it a little bit with some assumptions that we can't be certain of in the coming years.
I think what we're trying to do really is to do two things. One, to the best extent, to bring back what amounts to about roughly $4.5 to $5 million worth of revenue, if we can help bring those customers in without harming everybody else in the process. And since we're only talking about maybe 6 to 7 customers total, we didn't think having those additional contracts or tweaks is really constitutes a huge change in rate structure. I think the rate is going to be the same for everybody, with the exception for those few that will opt to jump on one of those contracts and instead of just coming in like everybody else. I understand exactly your point, and there will come the time when we need to invest, and that is in the works, by the way. We are looking now at trying to figure out how much money we can put in order to invest in building resources that are internal to our work area, and to build micro grids, and to do all the programs that we want to do. And even with all that, we're still going to be left with some money to be able to rebate customers, unless of course we have this July judgment that may get us to come back and revisit with everything that we do.
Any other questions for staff? Any member of the public wishes to address the board on this item? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Bringing it back to the board, what's the pleasure of the board?
I'll move the agenda item.
Been moved by Ms. Palacio, second by Ms. Montoya. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Great. Moving on to item 15, board member reports and comments. Is there any reports or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none. All right, I think we're done. Thank you. I'd like to adjourn the meeting.